Tips for handling your Social Security case. A medical source statement versus I can't even hooked on phonics today. A medical source statement versus a form. Okay. 13 years ago when I first started doing this, going on 13 years ago, it used to be regular routine practice where you'll have representatives who will say, hey, will you get a doctor to fill out your form? The form would be what we call a residual functional capacity form, which was designed to give a breakdown of the limitations that the individual had. Back then, it was not too, when you had those forms, a lot of times the LJs would give deference to those forms if the medical records supported what they had to say. In recent years, I have found more and more representatives, more and more judges tend to not look favorably upon those. And the case law, especially in some of the circuits that I've looked at, not very user-friendly. And why? Because they're considered what we call checkoff forms. Let me tell you what the problem with the checkoff form is. One, a lot of times these forms, other than just saying, sit for this long, stand for that long, walk for this long, lift this much, do this much, doesn't really give a lot of basis or factual support to how those limitations were determined. Two, sometimes they stand alone, and sometimes they are in direct opposition to what the medical records say. Let me give you a good example. Your doctor fills out a form for you saying that, you've been going to this primary, not a specialist, but a primary doctor because you got a bad back. Doctor fills out a form saying you can only stand for an hour, you can only sit for 2 hours, you can only walk for an hour, and you're going to miss 3 or 4 days a week because of all the pain that you're going in. Okay, so you look at this form and you're thinking, bam, booyah, slam dunk, baby, and you're thinking you're in there. And all of a sudden, what happens is that Social Security looks at this form, but then they look and they say, wait a minute, you're going to a primary doctor. All of your physical examinations from your doctor indicates that you are within normal limits of your various range of motion. You're going to an internal medicine, family practice, or general practice doctor. The doctor has not recommended that you need to go to a specialist. You are receiving You're receiving ibuprofen and Flexeril or Motrin, which for the most part is a mild pain medication and muscle relaxer. So, if looking at your evidence, this is what it shows us. How does this doctor make this leap that your condition is so disabling that you can barely sit, stand, and walk for 4 hours out of an 8-hour workday, and that you're going to miss 2 or 3 days because of all the pain you're in? The medical records don't support it. The limitations that are in this report. So, why do I say a medical source statement? In a medical source statement, I've talked about this in other videos where I say, you want a doctor to lay it out. How long have they been treating you? What have they been treating you for? What limitations they have, that you have. What is the basis for these limitations? Whether they be, I've performed an X-ray, MRI, CT, nerve conduction, EMG, and based on these things, is my belief that these are the limitations from these particular types of conditions. I believe 1, 2, 3, and have them spell it out in detail. That is an opinion. And more importantly, if they can, ask them to cite to the particular points in the record. I've seen my client. I've had her last 4 visits. I noticed a decreased range of motion in her lower back as well as in her upper dominant right extremity, which is basically your right arm if you're right-handed. And as a result, I noticed that her grip strength is reduced, which is going to prevent her from being able to hold things. You're sitting here going, man, Attorney Reeves, that sounds like a lot of work. Yeah, which is why when you ask a doctor to do that, they're going to charge you a lot of money. Because what you're asking them to do is you're asking them to literally paint a picture based on their medical evidence of why they believe you are limited in terms of your conditions. Plain and simple. Now, can they do that with a form? Absolutely. Now, am I saying that you should never use a form? No. What I'm saying is if you use a form, ask the doctor to provide some type of statement to kind of support that form. Like I've seen more forms now, what representatives will do is they literally will have places in there they'll say, what is the medical records for the basis of what you did? How long have you been treating this individual? What type of objective studies did you rely on in coming to these limitations? That does the same thing. So what you've got basically is a medical source statement infused with a form. So this way, when Social Security looks at it, they can say, X-ray was done on March 13th, 2014, and MRI was done in January. The results of that revealed, mild stenosis, multiple bulging discs, degenerative joint disease, as a result, bam, 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 bam. You want the doctor to spell it out because at the end of the day, the most weight they're going to put is on the doctor, unless everything else says to the contrary. So if the doctor can lay it out for them in such a manner, they can now have a basis by which they can rely upon to determine whether they should give weight to that doctor's opinion or discard it because everybody else says to the contrary.